Welcome back to another episode of With a Grain of Salt. I'm your host, Isaiah Salter, and I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in for yet another week. Another With a Grain of Salt episode. You know, today is currently Sunday. Yesterday, I usually shoot my podcast episodes on Saturday. I came into the studio to shoot the podcast, and honestly, I was just feeling incredibly anxious, and I couldn't really get into the flow. I couldn't really kind of get into my groove, and I just kept overthinking. So what I decided to do was just take a deep breath, reset, and then go about the rest of my day and come back, the next day, which is right now, and reshoot the podcast. Just kind of, reset, ground myself, and give myself the space that was needed during that time. I think, and it's going to lead into this podcast episode, because this podcast is going to be on navigating vices, temptation, things of that nature, things that, can really take us off our path. And something I've learned from my past is that, whenever I would feel anxious, or I would have those, anxious emotions, whatever it may be, it would always lead me to doing things that weren't really aligned with the vision and the highest version of myself. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the things that we go through, especially our emotions, is, if you really lean into them with the right perspective and you start to have the right viewpoint on them, they can start to be guides and signals to help you develop a deeper sense of yourself and understand yourself on a deeper level. And so, I was just thinking about this topic this past week. I was talking a lot with, a good friend of mine about, just navigating temptation, different vices, lust, all of these different things that we deal with on our journeys. And I just felt like doing a podcast on, navigating vices was, the right thing for this week. So we're going to get into 6 ways to overcoming vices and negative habits. It says vices come in many forms: social media addiction, smoking, drinking, excessive procrastination, pornography, emotional eating, even negative self-talk. At their core, vices aren't just bad habits. They're about what we turn to when we're avoiding pain, discomfort, or deep emotional truths. Like we were just talking about, I realized, in my past, I had a tendency to, when I felt anxious, go to things that weren't really aligned. Then it says the real challenge isn't just quitting a vice. It's understanding why you turn to it in the first place, and then transforming your habits in a way that leads to long-term growth. So let's get into the first point. The first point is awareness, recognizing the vice. You can't overcome something you refuse to acknowledge. Many of us go through life unconsciously engaging in behaviors that don't serve us, simply because they become our routine. We say, it's just a little stress relief, or everyone does it, it's not that bad. But that's exactly how vices work. They creep in subtle and slow ways, and slowly gain power over us. The first step to breaking free is developing radical self-awareness. You have to be honest with yourself about what your vice is and why it exists. It's rarely about the action itself. It's about the emotional void or discomfort you're trying to numb. That's deep. That's something that, going back to what I started this episode with, but I realized that these things that I was doing, whether it was, watching things I wasn't supposed to be watching, indulging in habits I wasn't supposed to indulge in. For me, probably one of the biggest vices that I had to overcome was smoking marijuana. I realized that, there was something underlying that was making me go to these things. And I really started to, when I started to do some, self-discovery and some self-work, I started to realize that when I felt anxious, or when I felt stressed, or when I didn't want to do the task at hand, I would go to these things that would be my vices. They would kind of help me to relieve some of that tension that I was feeling internally, and I've realized that so many of us just so many of us unconsciously just go through our lives going to these vices without ever really getting to the underlying problem. And if you never solve the root of the problem, you're always going to fall back into the loop. You're always going to fall back into the cycle. And it can become such a strong or tough battle that you have to face every single time you're trying to overcome this vice or this temptation or whatever it may be in your life, because you're not getting to the root, right? And I speak from experience. It says every vice is a symptom of something deeper. If you don't address the root cause, the habit will find a way back into your life, even if you temporarily stop. There's a quote that says, change is not about fighting the old, but building the new. So many of us, when we're trying to overcome negative habits or overcome a vice, whatever it may be, we get into these wars, these battles with it, right? And it becomes this daily fight of us just trying to use willpower to stop doing that thing. But what we fail to realize is that the more you fight something, whether you realize it or not, you're still giving it energy. When in actuality, the way to overcome something is not to fight it, not to keep giving it energy and try to, overcome it with willpower, but rather turn your gauge to newer and aligned habits and start focusing more on implementing those things in your life. And slowly over time, the energy that was once going to these negative habits or these vices in your life are going to start going to the things that are aligned, that are in congruence with the highest version of yourself, right? And slowly you're just taking that energy away. And you won't even have the same urge to do those things anymore because you haven't been giving them so much energy or focus, right? And that was a big shift that really helped me overcome something like smoking. I was still doing the same exact things, but I just tried to stop smoking. I just tried to literally just stop smoking, but I was still doing the same daily habits. I was still going about my business. So it became this everyday fight where I would just have to keep fighting the urge. And 10 times out of 10, you're going to lose that battle. You have to be able to replace that vice or that habit with something better, more aligned, so that's where your energy is going. It says true awareness means observing yourself without judgment. If you shame yourself every time you engage in a vice, you'll stay trapped in the cycle. You cannot shame or guilt yourself into growth. You cannot shame or guilt yourself into overcoming a vice. You must have awareness in your life without judging yourself. So many of us, when we become aware of these things, we allow shame and guilt and resentment for ourselves to come in. And all that causes is us to feel worse about ourselves. And because we feel worse about ourselves, we end up falling right back into the thing we're trying to get away from. You have to learn how to give yourself compassion and grace throughout your journey. You have to learn how to be aware of the things that you're dealing with without judging, so negatively. Some tangible steps for cultivating awareness and starting to recognize the vices in your life. Start tracking your vice for a week. When you do it, how do you feel before and after? What's triggering it? Write this down and see the patterns that come up. Write this down and see the patterns that come up. Another thing, right? I never really was, I know everybody has their own vices, right? For me, definitely marijuana was at the top of my list. Lust was up there too. And it's still something that, I navigate on an everyday basis. It's not something that you overcome and then it's gone. It's something that you have to constantly work at. But I realized that when I really started to take a deep dive into the things that I was indulging in my vices, and I started to look at the underlying things that led me into those things, it started exposing certain areas of my life that I started to be like, oh, that's why I keep going to this thing. And I need to learn how to feel that same thing, but have a healthier outlet, have a healthier way to express it, have a healthier way to navigate it, rather than going to these things that after I do it, I feel so empty. I feel so, you know what I mean? And so when I started to realize that, okay, whenever I feel anxious or I feel some inner turmoil, I always run to the smoking, or I'm so quick to, go hit up somebody, whatever it may be. Once I became aware of that, now, I could work with myself through those situations. So now when I feel those things, I'm going to take a deep, deep breath. I'm going to pause. I'm going to reflect. I'm going to use the awareness that I've cultivated from seeing, what's been going on in my life. And I'm going to do my best to make an aligned decision out of that situation rather than going back to the vice. Are you going to be perfect? Absolutely not. You are going to sometimes fall back into the loop, but keep on showing up, keep on taking steps, and just focus on taking the next right step. And you're slowly over time going to learn how to navigate those vices in a healthier way. Ask yourself, what am I avoiding when I engage in this vice? What need am I trying to fulfill? Be brutally honest. Ask yourself these types of questions and be honest with yourself. You know what I mean? I'm avoiding this anxiety. I'm avoiding this anxious feeling. I'm avoiding the discomfort from, doing this task that I know I need to do. I'm avoiding the stress that I feel internally, right? Whatever it may be, figure out what you're avoiding. I'm avoiding really giving myself love and care and space because it's uncomfortable. So I'm going to go indulge in these things that just lead me to feeling worse about myself. Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So often we end up in different situations or in different environments or in different scenarios, and we look up and we're like, how do we even get here, right? Because we're not even conscious of the things that are actually driving us to these different places that are doing more harm than good, that are getting us hurt, you know what I mean, that are getting us involved with people or things that are not really aligned. And until you make the unconscious conscious, you will allow these things, these underlying things that you don't even know are there, to direct your life. And then you'll be wondering why all these things are happening, right? And it's a very, very tough place to be, because so many people live their whole life allowing underlying unconscious things to drive their vehicle. And then they wonder why, they feel so lost, so confused, so unfulfilled. They keep getting involved with people where they get taken advantage of, or they keep getting hurt, or whatever it may be, or they keep indulging in these vices or these negative habits that they just can't break free from. Because until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. Until you get to the root cause of, why am I doing this thing? Why do I keep attracting these type of people into my life? Why do I keep indulging in this habit or this thing? Until you make the unconscious conscious and get to the root of it, you're going to keep going through that cycle, right? Give yourself compassion and grace, and use this space that we've cultivated on this podcast to understand you're not alone. You are not alone. For all the men out there that are struggling with lust, temptation, watching things, doing things, you're not alone. Every man I know has in some way, shape, or form dealt with that, right? And it looks different for everybody, but understand you're not alone. You're a human being, and it's normal to go through that. Don't feel like it's abnormal to go through what you're going through, to have these, vices and deal with these things in your life. It is not abnormal. It's something that so many of us deal with, but we're just so scared to open up and talk about because we feel like it's abnormal. We feel like it's just something we're dealing with and nobody else is, right? But you're not alone, and you will overcome it. It just takes consistency. It takes showing up for yourself. It takes self-compassion. It takes being able to be vulnerable and honest about what you're dealing with. It takes awareness and intention. All the things that we talk about on this podcast, and we're going to do it together, because I'm telling you, like, the chokehold that smoking had on my life. I started smoking for the first time spring of 2020, and then I stopped really around 2022. And for those 2 years, it had me in a chokehold. It had me in a chokehold. And I also, especially when I got to college, I struggled with lust. Not in the sense of, I wasn't really watching too much, of that stuff or doing too much. I was doing it, obviously, but it wasn't like an addiction. It was more just my relationship with women. Like, I was just not allowing myself to really operate from a place of love. Or really there were certain unhealed parts in myself that I realized that were still unhealed, that was causing me to get involved with women from the places that I was getting involved with. Not wanting to commit, just wanting to, do things and keep it surface level, whatever it may be, and it was a struggle, and it's still till this day something that I have to constantly give energy and attention to make sure that I'm staying on the right track and staying in line, because it's so easy to fall back into those traps, especially as a man, right? Because I can only speak from a man's perspective. I know women and people in general deal with this, but specifically men, I know lust and temptation is something that is so incredibly difficult to overcome. But I just want to let you know you're not alone, and you can do it, absolutely. And it is a journey. It's a process. It's not a destination. It's not like you reach a certain point and then everything's good. No, it is something, like I said, you have to keep on working at. You have to keep on growing through. But you can do it. You absolutely can do it. Replacing, not just removing. Replacing, not just removing. This is point number 2. This is huge. This is huge. Many people fail to break a vice because they focus on only stopping the behavior without filling the void it leaves behind. But habits don't just disappear. They need to be replaced. Habits do not just disappear. They need to be replaced. If I told myself, like I said earlier, if I just stopped smoking, but I was still doing the same exact things throughout my day, that space that, would usually be put to smoking, if I just tried to stop smoking during that time, but I wasn't replacing that space with anything, my willpower would get tired over time, and I would fall right back into the habit. I need to replace that habit or that time of day that I was going to that vice with something that's more aligned, right? Go for a walk, read a book, do whatever you have to do. Replace it with a healthier habit. It says if you remove a habit but don't find a meaningful substitute, your brain will seek the easiest available pleasure, which often leads to falling back into the vice or picking up another vice. This is why quitting cold turkey without a plan usually doesn't work. Instead, you need to replace the habit with something that serves you while still giving your brain a sense of reward. It says the brain craves dopamine, the feel-good chemical associated with rewards. If your vice is giving you dopamine, you need a healthier way to get it. You need a healthier way to get dopamine. Exercise, cold shower, eat a healthy meal, right? Whatever it may be. The stronger your why, the easier it is to resist temptation. Shallow reasons don't last. That's something that I've realized is also a journey in itself, is really getting a strong enough why to overcome these things. And that's why it is a journey and it's not a destination. You have to understand that it's going to take some time to cultivate a strong enough why, a strong enough purpose to be like, you know what, I'm completely done. And you have to keep showing up for yourself. The reason a lot of people never get to that point is because, like we said earlier, we allow shame and guilt to come in. And you cannot shame or guilt yourself into growth. You are setting yourself up for failure if you allow those emotions to be the driving force for why you want to stop something. If you allow shame and guilt to be the reasons why you're trying to stop something, you're always going to fall back into that thing, because you cannot shame or guilt yourself into growth. Growth comes through compassion. Growth comes through intention. Growth comes through progression, not perfection. And growth comes from showing up for yourself through the mistakes, through the mess ups, through the tough days, and just taking it one step at a time. But you got it. You absolutely have it. But the stronger your why, the easier it is to resist the temptation. When I really kept, developing myself, and I got to a place to where I got clear on my vision, I got clear on the life I wanted to live, but also the man that I was trying to be. Even though I am single right now, I don't view singleness as, oh, I could just do whatever I want, just free flowing, whatever it is. It's preparation to be a husband. It's preparation to be the man that your family's going to need one day, and so really getting clear on the man that I'm trying to be, the life that I'm trying to live, the vision that I have in my head, helped me to, cultivate a strong enough why to say, you know what, I'm cutting out the things that are not aligned. Yes, it's going to be difficult, especially when you have to navigate certain seasons of isolation and you feel like you don't have anybody to go to. It's going to be difficult, but I know the person that I'm trying to become, and I know the things that are not aligned with it. And I have to do my best to feed more into the things that are aligned than I do just trying to fight the things that aren't aligned, right? And so it's a day-to-day process. It's a day-to-day journey, and you just have to keep on showing up for yourself, keep on taking steps, but you got it. Some tangible steps. Identify a replacement activity that still brings joy or stress relief. Swapping social media with reading, junk food with a new hobby, drinking with meditation, etc. Creating a reward system for making better choices. Small wins builds momentum, right? So if you go a whole week without indulging in your vice, treat yourself to something meaningful, like a nice like a nice meal, a movie, or a small purchase, whatever it may be. Have a reward system for showing up for yourself, right? One thing I have learned, though, and this is something that I struggled so much with, was not rewarding myself with the thing that I'm trying to get away from. Especially when it comes to, whether it's watching things or smoking or doing stuff to yourself. You guys know what I'm talking about. You go a week or 2 weeks straight without doing anything. And then, that Saturday or Sunday comes and you're like, man, well, I've been good the past 2 weeks. I could take a day. But you don't take a day to do the thing that you're trying to get away from. And that was something I struggled with so much. Like, why do I keep rewarding myself with the exact habit that I'm trying to stop doing? And I had to really be honest with myself. I was like, bro, you're setting yourself up for failure, because dang well when you do it, all that stuff just resurfaces. And now it's going to be even harder to say no the next day, because you're relying more on willpower. But you have to find a healthy reward system, a healthy, way to express you showing up for yourself without going back to the things that you're trying to get away from, right? The key is making sure the reward does not reinforce the vice itself, right? So let's say I'm trying to get away from watching pornography, right? I'm not going to reward myself after, a week or 2 weeks with smoking weed, because even though it's not the exact vice I'm trying to get away from, it's still a vice that can lead me right back into doing the thing I'm not trying to do. So you have to be very intentional with the things that you're rewarding yourself with for showing up for yourself. And this isn't like rewarding yourself and like you're throwing a huge party for yourself. No, it's just a small thing to make sure show yourself that you got your own back and that you're doing great and you're doing the best that you can and keep on taking steps, right? But be mindful of the things that you are rewarding yourself with so that they're not causing you to fall right back into the vice that you're trying to get away from, right? It says if you don't replace a habit, the void will replace it for you. So often we allow our voids to dictate the habits that we indulge in. And then when these habits lead us to, those dark places or those unhealthy relationships or those toxic environments, we're like, how the heck did we get here? What's going on? It's because we haven't filled that void in a healthy way, right? And so if you don't replace the habit, that void that's left from trying to stop that habit will replace itself. And usually it replaces itself with something that's aligned with that feeling, which is a negative habit or a bad vice, right? Number 3 says environment matters. We like to believe we have strong willpower, but the truth is our environment influences us more than we realize. If you're surrounded by triggers, you're making the battle 10 times harder than it needs to be. Your physical and social environments either support your growth or keep you stuck in old patterns. For example, if you're trying to cut back on drinking, but your closest friends always invite you to bars, resisting temptation becomes an uphill battle. Resisting temptation becomes an uphill battle. I talked about this last episode, but just like not allowing things to linger. That was something that I struggled with a lot, especially with smoking, man. Like, and lust in general, like, if you allow these things to linger, they're waiting for that one moment, that one situation where the door opens and they just rush in. You know what I mean? You have to learn how to really intentionally move in a way where you're guarding your heart. My mom always tells me, above all else, son, guard your heart, right? Above all else, guard your heart. That's protecting the most authentic, highest version of yourself. That's protecting your alignment. That's protecting your purpose. That's protecting the vision that you have in your heart and in your mind, and you have to be really mindful of, the things around you in your environment, the people you're around, because so often, like it said, we rely on willpower, and it's an uphill battle when you do that. And it's a very, very tough one, and it won't work. Even with, like, for me, like, I realized when it came to lust, I had to be really intentional with social media. Like, yeah, I post on social media, and obviously, like, I'm trying to grow that, and I have a podcast and things like that revolves around social media. But being intentional with social media has helped me tremendously, especially with like navigating, that part of me that's lustful and, can fall back into those urges and things like that. Because if I just go on and I'm doom scrolling, you're going to see something that triggers that emotion, that triggers that feeling within you, and it just leads down a loophole, you know what I mean? And yeah, you might win the first or second time or third time, but there's always going to be that one moment where you're extremely vulnerable and you just give in. And then you feel horrible about yourself, and it just creates that negative loop again, and it just compounds, and it's just It says willpower is like a muscle. It gets tired over time. The easier you make it to choose the right path, the less effort you'll need to resist the temptation. Right? So like I said, we are relying on willpower, but willpower is like a muscle. So if I go to the gym right now and I grab 30-pound dumbbells and I keep on repping them for curls, right? And let's say my bicep is willpower. Eventually, I'm going to burn out. There's no way I could just keep going, right? And I might be able to get to 30 reps or 40 reps. And I'm trying, I'm grinding, but eventually I'm going to get too tired. And that's willpower, right? You cannot just rely on willpower. You have to intentionally start to shift things in your life to help move you forward rather than just relying on willpower. Shift your environment in a way that aligns. Shift your routine in a way that aligns. Something that really helped me, and I'm really prioritizing this next week coming up, is time blocking. Like 12 to 3, I'm doing focused work. That 7 to 11, right? 7 to 11:30, that's me time. That's exercise. That's meditation. That's journaling. That's reading, whatever it may be. Like blocking out times. And then that afternoon, I'm going to focus on whatever it may be. Cooking a nice home cooked meal, maybe going for a drive, going to the store if I need to, hopping on a call, whatever I mean, like blocking out times and then shifting your environment to help be congruent with the routine that you're trying to instill. You know what I mean? And you have to be really intentional with this. You can't leave it up to chance, because when we leave things up to chance, that's how we fall right back into them vices. Speaking from experience, when you leave it up to chance, that's how you fall right back into them vices. And you have to truly make a decision internally that this is what you want to do. I think for me, something that I also realized is I wasn't all in. And what I mean by that is I wasn't fully all in on cutting out the smoking and, the lustful ways. I wasn't fully all in to a certain point. And, there came a day in particular where I woke up feeling so convicted internally, because I knew that where I'm trying to go, where I feel like God and the universe is pulling me to, those things can't go. And until you're really, really willing to cut them out fully, you won't be able to really rise to that next level. And so in that moment, I made a decision. I was like, you know what? I'm going all in on the aligned path. I'm not going to keep playing, hopscotch and going back and forth. I can't do that. And in those moments, man, everything can change for you. When you make that decision, everything can change for you. It does not mean, like we say, you're going to be perfect. It does not mean you won't still have situations or times or moments where, you mess up, you make a mistake. But when you have fully, went all in on something and you fully committed to it, the energy that you hold about that thing changes, right? And the way you view the things that you're trying to get away from changes, right? Because now you're not low-key trying to let them linger. Nah, we cutting them out. So when that urge come up, or that thing come up, or that thing is whatever, nah, we're not doing it. We're done. We're taking the next aligned step. We're not indulging in these things. And if we do by mistake, or maybe we're around certain people where they're doing things that we're trying to get away from, we're going to navigate accordingly. But it comes down to a decision. Some tangible steps for helping shift your environment and the things around you to help be more congruent with where you're trying to go and get away from those vices. Make the vices harder to access, like we talked about. Delete apps, remove unhealthy food, block certain websites, whatever you have to do. The more inconvenient it is, the less likely you are to engage in it. The more inconvenient something is, the less likely you are to engage in it. How often do we just try to stop doing a thing, but the convenience doesn't change? You have to make something inconvenient so it's less likely for you to engage in it. This is being intentional with your life. This is being intentional with who you spend time with and what you watch, right, and what you indulge in. You have to be intentional, because the more convenient something is, the more you're likely to engage in it. It says audit your circle. Surround yourself with people who align with the person you want to be, not the person you're trying to outgrow. How often do we stay around people who are aligned with the person that we're trying to outgrow? And why do you think we feel such tension when we're trying to, elevate to new versions of ourselves, to new levels of life? Because we're still staying around the environments and the people that are aligned with the person that we're trying to outgrow, And so you have to be intentional with that, and you have to audit your circle. You have to be willing to look around and see the people that are really in your life, who you're spending the most time around, and be honest. Are these people aligned with where I'm trying to go, or are they keeping me stagnant and stunting my growth? And once you answer that question honestly, then you have to make an honest decision after that. You have to be real with yourself. And sometimes that means cutting ties with certain people. Doesn't mean you don't love them. Doesn't mean you don't care about them. But love and care does not mean I have to stay around you. Love and care does not mean I have to keep indulging in things with the people around. No, that is not what that means. You have to love and care yourself so much that you're willing to walk away. You have to love and care for yourself so much that you're willing to cut ties and step out of, some social circles and environments that no longer serve you. It says you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. James Clear, I love this. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. If you set a goal, I want to stop smoking, but the systems in your life are congruent with somebody who smokes, you're not going to rise to the level of you stop smoking. You're going to fall to the level of your systems that causes you to smoke, right? And so that's why you have to really start to get to the systems in your life and create a system, a social rhythm that aligns with somebody who does not smoke. You can't stay in a social rhythm that's aligned with somebody who smokes or somebody who does a negative habit or somebody who does something you're not trying to do, and think that just because you made that a goal to stop doing it, it's just going to happen organically. No, you have to be willing to change the social rhythm, right? And apply this to anything. It could be eating certain things. It could be watching certain things. It could be indulging in certain things, whatever it is. Y'all know what y'all personal vices are. We all have our own unique vices. I told y'all mine too. The smoking and the lust. The smoking and the lust, for sure. No question. By far the two. And so you have to audit your systems in a way that is aligned with somebody who doesn't do those things, right? And it takes time and it's a process. So give yourself that grace. Number 4 says mastering the art of pausing. I like this. Mastering the art of pausing. Most vices happen in moments of impulse. You're stressed, tired, overwhelmed, anxious. And even before you think about it, you're indulging in the habit. The key to breaking this cycle is learning how to pause before reacting. You have to learn how to pause. You have to learn how to take a deep breath, because pausing creates space for intentionality. Pausing creates space for intentionality. When you slow down and consciously observe the urge, you weaken its power over you. So often these urges that we're trying to overcome have so much power over us because we don't pause and really observe it. We just allow it to drive us into doing, an unhealthy habit. We feel something, we do it immediately. There is no space in between what we feel and what we do. You have to be able to create space between what you feel and then the action that comes after that. And that's pausing with intentionality. That's taking a deep breath. That's bringing awareness into your life, because that's going to help you to shift into a more aligned, authentic path, a more aligned, authentic version of yourself, right? It says your emotions are temporary, but the consequences of giving into a vice can last much longer. Absolutely. Right? The emotion of anxiety is temporary. It's going to go. But the effects that can come from me indulging, in the smoking or, watching things or doing things that I'm not supposed to be doing, they last much longer. That can mess up somebody's whole week. That can mess up somebody's whole month. You know what I mean? That's how these vices can creep into our lives and take us completely off of our path. You know what I mean? And you have to understand that what I'm feeling is temporary, right? But I need to make an aligned decision so I don't have to deal with the consequences of doing something that is not aligned with me, because I know that that's going to sting much longer. The emotion is temporary. The consequence of what you do lasts much longer. So make sure you're choosing things that are aligned with the outcomes that you want to get, right? Just a 5-minute delay in acting on an impulse can significantly reduce its power. A 5-minute delay. I'll do one even better. Just a 2-minute delay. Take a deep, I'm talking, deep breath. Deep breath. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling a little worried. I'm feeling a little stressed. I'm feeling a little confused. And I know usually when I feel this way, I'll just go grab, that unhealthy snack. I'll just go watch that thing. I'll just go, smoke or drink. But I know that when I do those things, I never feel good about myself after. And I know that what I'm feeling is temporary. Let me make an aligned decision. Let me go to the tools in my toolbox. And let me take the next right step. Right there. And if you can really, really try your best to do that every time you feel that urge or you feel that emotion that leads you to doing that vice, your life will change. You're not going to be perfect. We're not here to be perfect. We're here to progress. And progress means showing up. Progress means having awareness and intention, right? Progress means taking a pause before you act. That practice that we just did right there, do that with yourself. If you need to come back to this podcast and listen to that, I'm with you, right? It's something that I use as literally, like, what I just did with y'all is exactly what I do with myself. Exactly what I do with myself. A tangible step for, key number 4 mastering the art of pausing. Physically change your state. Move, go outside, splash cold water on your face. Anything to disrupt the pattern. A lot of times when we're feeling certain things, we just sit in it sometimes, right? And we just try to fight it in the moment. Get up and do something. Sometimes you just got to go for a walk. Sometimes I just got to go to the gym. Sometimes I just got to splash cold water on my face. I just got to go cook. I got to do something externally that gets my mind off of what I'm feeling. Because if I just sit and just soak on it, it's a wrap. It's a wrap, right? And this is understanding yourself. Everybody's different, but go journal it out, whatever it is. Viktor Frankl says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. Once you start creating space between what you feel and the action that comes after it, that's where you regain your power over your life. That's where you bring intention into your life, right? I'm going to start creating pauses between what I feel and what I do so that I'm doing my best to make aligned decisions rather than unaligned reactions, right? A lot of times when we don't create that pause between stimulus and response, we feel something and then we just do something out of it rather than really pausing, bringing awareness and intention into that pause, and then taking an aligned step, making an aligned decision, right? Number 5, key number 5, forgiveness in a growth mindset. One of the biggest traps people fall into is all or nothing thinking. They slip up once, feel guilty, and then spiral into self-destruction. The truth is, mistakes are part of the process. What matters isn't whether you slip up. It's how you respond afterward. Instead of seeing failure as failure, view it as feedback. When I mess up, I'm going to view it as feedback. What did I do to get here? How can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? Rather than, oh my gosh, I messed up. I just ruined the streak. This is the worst thing ever. I'm a failure. I'm no good. I'll never overcome this thing. That is two totally different framings on how to deal with the same exact situation. If you choose framing B, which is where you're beating yourself up, shame and guilt is just clouding over your life, and you're just having that negative self-talk, and you feel like a failure, you feel like a mistake, you're only causing more self-destruction. You're only causing more lack of self-worth, and that is going to only cause you to do more things that aren't aligned, rather than framing number A. Okay, let me take a pause. Made a mistake, I messed up. How did I get here? What can I learn from this situation? How can I grow through this? And how can I take the next right step after this situation and not allow this experience or this moment to compound into, the rest of my day or the rest of my week, right? It says shame keeps you stuck in a cycle. Self-compassion helps you move forward. Shame keeps you stuck in a cycle. You cannot shame yourself into growth. So often when we allow shame and guilt to be the driving force for us trying to grow through something, it creates a negative cycle where we can't overcome it. You have to learn how to bring self-compassion into your life, because self-compassion is the thing that's going to help you start moving forward, forgiving yourself, right? Giving yourself grace, having your own back. That's going to allow you to move forward and grow through the things that you go through. The goal is not perfection, but progression. Small wins build long-term success. Some tangible steps. When you slip up, pause and reflect. What led to this? What can I do differently next time, right? Create a simple reset ritual, something that realigns you quickly, like journaling, prayer, or revisiting your goals. For me, it's the next right step mentality, because I can be in a certain situation or, a certain space where, I made the wrong decision, or I did something that is a mistake. Okay, what's the next right decision or the next right step in this moment right now, right? Whether that's, okay, well, finish out the rest of your routine like you said you were going to do, or go do this thing, or finish that task, or all right, go journal real quick, go meditate real quick, whatever it may be. Go really prioritize being present when you're cooking, whatever it may be. Next right step mentality. Create a reset ritual that helps you to take the next right step in your life. Nelson Mandela says, do not judge me by my successes. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. True character is about how many times you fell down and got back up. How many times you went through tough situations and responded in an aligned way, right? And point number 6, spiritual alignment and higher purpose. Vices often thrive when we feel disconnected from ourselves, from purpose, or from something greater than us. The deepest way to overcome vices is by aligning with a higher vision for your life. Absolutely. When you're deeply connected to your values, your mission, or your faith, destructive habits lose their appeal. When you're really trying to embody the highest version of yourself and you're really trying to live that out every single day, the things that are not aligned with you, they lose their appeal. So those vices, those negative habits, those negative environments, those contracting circles you're trying to get away from, they lose their appeal because they really do not align with the vision and the person that you're trying to become in the way that you're taking steps towards every single day, right? And so that's why it's so important to really, really have a vision for your life, really go down the journey of self-discovery and tap into the things that you have within yourself, start to build up your self-worth, start to see yourself as a divine, beautiful individual because you are that. And when you start seeing yourself as that, doing things that are not aligned with that version of you, they're going to lose their appeal. It's going to be a lot easier to say no to those vices, to those negative habits, right? To those very negative social circles. It says many vices are a distraction from a deeper spiritual emptiness. Many vices are a distraction from a deeper spiritual emptiness. That's deep. Because whether you realize it or not, life is spiritual. You are spiritual. You're a spiritual being having a human experience. Cultivating a spiritual foundation in your life is going to be unique to you. You can be Christian, you can be Muslim, you can be Buddhist, Hindu, you can be just spiritual and kind of be open, whatever it may be. But you have to have some sense of spiritual foundation in your life, some sense of faith, because you are spiritual, right? Because if you just neglect that part of life, you're always going to feel like there's a void internally because you're a spiritual being. So if you're not tending to that part of yourself, you're always going to feel like there's something disconnected within you, right? And that's how vices can kind of creep in. They creep into those spaces that we're not tending to within ourselves, right? And then that's what we go to. It says discipline is not about restriction. It's about freedom from what controls you. Discipline is not about restriction. It's about freedom from what controls you. That's beautiful. Some tangible steps. Develop a grounding practice, prayer, meditation, journaling, walking in nature, whatever it may be, right? For me, a grounding practice is my morning routine. Meditate 5 to 10 minutes, journal, read, really spend some time with myself. It helps align myself for the day. It helps get me right for the day. It says when you have a strong enough why, you can bear almost any how. Friedrich Nietzsche. When you have a strong enough why, you can bear almost any how. The last thing it says is the journey to overcoming vices isn't easy, but it's worth it. Awareness, intentional replacement, environment, pause, self-compassion, and spiritual alignment. These are the keys to breaking free. These are the keys to breaking free. I can already tell by talking about this topic, we're going to get back to this a lot more. This was kind of the first time I've ever really made a podcast episode on this type of stuff. And I know this is something that a lot of us, go through. A lot of us have, everybody has vices, right? But being able to open up that conversation and really talk about them, freely and be vulnerable about it is something that we need more of. Just to show you that you're not alone, to hear other people's perspectives for how they deal with their own things, right? And to create that sense of community, like we're all in this together, because we are, we really are. And so that's definitely going to do it for this episode. I really hope, you guys got some insight from this. I know I did. It kind of reaffirmed, the path that I'm trying to stay on and continuing to stay diligent and devoted to the vision that I have and the highest version of myself, So I appreciate y'all so much. I love y'all so much. And remember, most importantly, to take everything with a grain of salt. I will catch you guys next week. Deuces.